First off though, the fish camp that you all see right here looks just like the ones that my family saw throughout the interior of Alaska during the summer months. And this is because every summer, families pack up and head up to 30 miles away from their village to their family's fish camp. Now, for example, my family has our fish camp just upriver from our village in Canada. And we use set nets to catch our salmon. However, the centerpiece of many Athabascan fish camps is the fish reel that you see right here. This is an efficient fish catching machine that allows families to catch enough salmon for not just themselves, but also their dog teams through the winter months. And now, if you look up on shore, you can see those canvas wall tents, and those are just what many of us stand during the summertime while we're at fish camp. Closer to me though, you can see the outdoor air drying rack, which is just where we hang salmon until it's ready to go into the smokehouse, which is the large permanent structure behind me. Now this smokehouse is the key to turning the salmon into a lightweight, fully dehydrated, and preserved food source. But of course, once preserved, we need to store it, so we'll put it up in the cache, which is that small structure on stilts. Now we keep the cache on stilts so little animals don't get in. But speaking of animals, if you look back this way, between those canvas wall tents, you can see those wooden crates. Now those crates are dog houses because every summer our dogs come with us to fish camp to activate the natural alarm system over the area.
Well, that'd be especially important, especially if a bear were to come by. They could take the salmon down with one foul swoop and there goes all your work. But speaking of work, Leo, what did you say was on your cutting table again?
Yeah, so right here I have a chum salmon. Now here in the interior of Alaska, we actually get 3 different types of salmon. We get 1 run each of king salmon and silvers, and then we'll get 2 runs of chums. Now, because chum salmon are typically regarded as a slightly lesser quality salmon, and because we get those 2 runs, these are typically the ones that we set aside for dog food. So right here, I've just began preparing the most basic dog food cut. I started by removing the head from the body, and then I separated these 2 fillets from the backbone, leaving it connected at the tail so I can still hang it in the dry rack later. And I just cut off his backbone. But as you can see, we still got some meat left on there. So at my fish camp, usually go to the dogs as a summer snack. Now, a chum head would also go to the dogs, but if this was a king or a silver salmon head, it would be made into an absolute delicacy called fish head soup. And that is always something that we set aside for our elders.
Fish head soup. What does that taste like, Leo?
I don't know, I'm not old enough.
Oh, okay. Wait a little bit until we mask again. But Leo, I see you making some cuts into the side of the fillet. What does that help with?
So next I just have to score the salmon, which is creating these diagonal cuts through the flesh down to the skin. This will really help create more surface area throughout the salmon, which will allow the smoke to work deeper inside and further dehydrate it.
I always love this as a photo, folks. Once she's done cutting the fish, she'll hold it up and all of those cuts will open up like vents, and it's actually quite beautiful. Now, fish camp, it wasn't just a time to work. It was actually a great time to learn about your culture and your heritage from your grandparents and your elders. A time to come together as a family to learn about your traditions. Nicely well done. Once again, Leo. Are you going to take that fish and put it right into the smokehouse, or do you leave it out to dry?
So I never want to put a wet or a dirty salmon directly into the smokehouse because it could mold. So instead, I'm going to hang this one outside, just on this outdoor air drying rack, until it forms a sheen or blaze. Now, thankfully, it's a very nice morning with the sun right coming down on us. So it should only take around 10 to 15 minutes out here, and then it'll be ready for the smokehouse. But that's when we need to keep in mind that every family has their own techniques and preferences for smoking salmon. But everything we have at this fish camp here is dog food, so it'll go into the smokehouse and rotate around for 2 or even 3 weeks. Because by that point, the salmon will become fully dehydrated. It'll weigh less than a pound, and it'll look a lot like this one right here.
Well, that's perfectly dehydrated. It actually looks a lot like rawhide. You could bundle it up like firewood, give it to the dogs one by one. But what would you do differently for people?
So for ourselves, there's definitely some differences. First off, we typically start with a king or a silver salmon, and then we'll put a bit more time and care into the process, usually beginning by washing the salmon really well. And as much as we love putting our salmon into these yummy fillets, we'll often instead cut them down into these thin vertical pieces called salmon strips. Either way, everything then goes into a brine. And my family likes to use a mixture of brown sugar, honey, and salt. And the salt is great because it can really help keep the bugs off, especially on hot days like today. Now once they're done on the drying rack, though, they'll go into the smokehouse for a much shorter time period than the dog food, usually like just 2 days. Because at that point, the salmon will have a nice and soft texture. But the final difference is the wood that we use, because for ourselves, we love a cottonwood or an alder wood, which will give the salmon a sweet and smoky flavor. But for the dogs, we can use spruce wood, driftwood, or any wood for that matter, because they're not picky.
No, they'll usually be happy for anything. But Leo, we're going to hold on to that good recipe of yours, that sweet brine and that sweet alderwood smoke. It sure sounds delicious. As we make our way over to the mooring area here, could you share with us a little bit about what the village experience has to offer?
Of course, so all